Please confirm that my audio is good and you can see my screen.
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right. I'm happy to be here this afternoon. Okay, let me share my. All right. Okay, so it's a wonderful afternoon this Thursday. I'm happy to be here again after a while. Mr. Paul Erubami is unavoidably absent, and I'll be taking us on today's session of the lunch hour. My name is Faith Akiyoyo, and I am currently the head of corporate services at Max-Migold Limited. Before we dive into today's topic, I quickly want to remind us of the ongoing Facility Management Mastercraft Diploma Program. The class is currently ongoing. It started May 6th. Registration will end tomorrow, which is month end. We are currently running the 21st batch. We are preparing to begin the 22nd batch, which will begin on August 19th. Registration is ongoing with that as well. We have the physical class, we have the virtual class. The physical classes hold on Saturdays at the University of Lagos HRDC building. The virtual class holds during the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. So you can try to look at your schedule and see what works for you. It's important that you grow your career in facility management. Many of us are working in the business environment already, but then we are answering different titles or different role names, as it were. But then it's important we get the training so we can evolve in our career. The registration of the class is actually 15,000 registration fee, and the physical class costs 600,000. The virtual class is 500,000, and there is an avenue for you to pay in installments. You can start paying now. We know how the country is, as it were. So it's, if you cannot pay at once, you can spread your payment. So I'm sure our team will drop the link to register if you want to. We also have high impact courses, usually a 2-day training that can also help you to understand more about the facility management industry and the things you do on a day-to-day basis. So this high impact courses is basically for those that are already in the business and want to improve in one thing or the other. So we have a course scheduled for 13th to 14th of June, which is the facility management operations. So you can take advantage of that as well. In the course of publicizing this topic for today, one of the posts that was actually on social media was, I'd like to read it out. Dreading Sunday nights, feeling tight before your presentation. This could be a sign of workplace anxiety, a common issue causing unease and worry around work. It can zap your energy and focus, but you are not alone. There are ways to manage it. So today we'll be talking about managing workplace anxiety. And I'm sure many of us must have found ourselves in this particular situation. It is not alien to most of us. Everyone experiences anxiety at some point in their lives. And anxiety is a normal reaction that is characterized by stress, especially excessive stress in the workplace. It is normal to have fear or feel out of place occasionally at work. And it can also become a very serious problem when the anxiety becomes unmanageable, when it's difficult for you to go through it or eventually eliminate it from your life. Okay, and it can actually make you perform poorly at work, keeps you from your everyday activity. So we know that anxiety can actually have a negative impact in the quality of our work and our work performance. It can also affect our relationship with our colleagues. Identifying workplace anxiety is very, very important, and learning powerful ways or strategies to cope with this particular thing is helpful. We go a long way in helping us eliminate anxiety instead of working against it. So with our managing workplace anxiety course, we would learn so much about how we can recognize symptoms of anxiety. We also understand how we can feel more confident in our professional environments, and we also learn how to overcome the challenges that the workplace might eventually bring. We're going to, research has constantly shown that when clear goals are associated with learning, it occurs more easily and rapidly. So the reason why we're doing this course today is to help us explore the types of workplace anxiety, learn to recognize symptoms and warning signs, determine ways of coping and managing, recognize common triggers and accelerants, learn the difference between anxiety and common nervousness. Yes, there's a difference between anxiety and common nervousness. So in the course of the lesson today, we'll understand those. A quote from Charles H. Spurgeon says, "Our anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows, but with only what empties today of its strength." So it means when we are thinking about things that we need to do tomorrow, tasks that we need to take care of tomorrow, and then we are feeling anxiety today, it makes us unable to deliver the tasks that we have at hand. So we have several types of anxiety. We react to stressful situations at different times, and we have biological reaction that can actually result to anxiety or fear when we are faced with stressful situations, such as taking a test or making very important decisions. Growing up, we know that we had times when we had to write a test, or we had to do a debate, or we had to present something, or in school we had to do project defense and the likes. These are times when we would say it's actually normal to have anxiety at that time. But when the feeling of anxiety becomes long lasting, that is when it becomes a serious issue. So anxiety cannot be defined as one isolated condition, but we have several hundreds of symptoms. But as we go on, we try to understand these symptoms. Now, generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, is the most common type of anxiety, and is usually defined as a constant sense of tension, and panic. People who suffer from GAD, they find it difficult to control their worries most of the days. So it means throughout the day, they have difficulty focusing, they are constantly restless, they have low energy levels, and they have clenched muscles or tensed muscles, throughout the day. So that could happen. The source of anxiety may not always be identified, making it difficult to resolve the problem. And that is one thing that is really important. When we are able to identify the type of anxiety we are having, it will be easy for us to resolve the issue. So some of the things that relates with this GAD could be difficulty sleeping or concentrating, or being restless, like I mentioned earlier. So these are some of the things that we see from time to time. So we have social anxiety. This particular anxiety is actually known as social phobia, a fear of crowds, or a fear of public situations. Feeling you feel you're in public and you're being scrutinized. You're in public and you feel embarrassed. You fear what people will say. You fear being judged. You fear watched by people. This is social anxiety. And it actually causes people to isolate themselves and eventually feel alone. Although it's difficult to escape these particular fears, but it can be managed, and also it can be resolved eventually. So panic disorder is another type. It's a type of anxiety disorder that is characterized by recurrent and unexpected attacks of intense fear. This panic disorder might not necessarily happen at work alone. It can happen even in our daily life. Sometimes mothers that have children, for example, they are somewhere far away, and then they're just, having that panic, oh, I need to go and get my children and stuff like that. They start feeling this fear of not having control over a situation, and you see someone who now starts having shallow breathing, sweating profusely, increased heart rate, and possibly physical pains also. So it is natural to have these feelings from panic. especially when you're in a stressful situation. So, but these panic disorders or feelings of fear cannot happen without warning, okay? It's actually a warning to tell you, oh, something is happening, or you're not in control of your situation around you, okay? So it's important for us to identify these panic disorders and recognize these symptoms that are associated with them so that we can better manage the symptoms, okay? We have phobias also that are common types of anxiety. And this generally, we have people that are afraid of one animal or the other, people that fear snake, people that fear spider or cockroaches, people suffer from certain phobias, that can become so overwhelming. And when they are faced with such fear, it is difficult for them to return to a normal state, inability to control fears, even after facing that fear itself, okay? So these phobias don't actually interfere with our everyday lives. This like, oh, cockroach or spider or the likes, they don't interfere with our everyday lives, but we may actually have to encounter these fears at some point, okay? But phobias that can occur at work, such phobias could include public speaking, like I mentioned earlier, or the fear of crowd, or that can actually be addressed right away, since they hinder our ability to function normally at work. Obsessive compulsive disorder, the OCD, I'm sure some of us have heard about this, is an anxiety disorder that involves patterns of unwanted obsessions or fears that may lead to perform repetitive behaviors. We have individuals that have OCD, they need to perform certain things, compulsive acts that can lead to feeling of anxiety. So we see that it can also be significant to distress to those living with OCD, especially within the workplace. So we have fear of being contaminated, or fear of death around, needing symmetry and order, fear of harming yourself or others. We've seen people with OCD that you can see them as people that are really meticulous, okay, or people that want their table to be arranged in a certain manner. And if you move something from here to there, it becomes something that can become stressful to them. But these things can actually be controlled. Rachel Eber said, anxiety is the space between the now and the then. So it's you're here now, and then something is happening later, and then you're wondering, how am I going to cope with this issue? What am I going to do between now and then? This is what Richard Abel has to say. So now, anxiety is more than just a feeling. It can be a physical ailment. It does not affect us only emotionally. It can actually lead to various mental symptoms, but it can also cause a list of physical symptoms that can actually harm us. So we have common physical symptoms of anxiety, which could include headache, nausea, increased heart rate, muscle cramps. These are physical symptoms that we might have as a result of anxiety. And when we notice these symptoms, is a trigger for us to act. So when we become so anxious and our adrenaline starts to flow and causes our senses to go into an overdrive, it causes our heart rate to increase. It's important that we calm ourselves down, try to take in air, try to take a deep breath, allow the symptoms to pass before you resume any activity that you need to do. So since it's what we cannot actually prevent, we cannot prevent this particular event from happening, the only thing we can do is to just take a rest and try to take deep breaths, until we feel calm. So we have panic attacks. They are common symptoms of different types of anxiety. So though we have panic attacks that can be serious, that can be even life-threatening, we have panic attack that can present, it just alarms our body, telling us something is wrong. Upset stomach, dizziness, fatigue, muscle pains. Okay, many people have these panic attacks, usually have more than one, sometimes more than one symptoms happening at the same time. So this can make the symptoms really worse and can, trigger a lot of things in our body system. So we have the headache. Increased anxiety definitely leads to headache. And we have this most times at work when we feel, oh, I need to do something, and then I just have sudden headache. All we need to do is to calm ourselves down, take a cup of water, try to, as much as you can, to be calm. take pain relief if it goes on, lie down for a while, take a deep breath. These are things we need to do to be able to calm ourselves down. Sometimes it could happen as a result of sudden light and maybe noise around us. We just need to identify these things or these symptoms around us. It is also normal to feel some shaking or trembling when we become nervous, especially when we are giving a speech or when we are in public speaking, or when we are waiting for an important phone call, when we want to make a certain important decision. We feel this trembling and shaking that it becomes so intense that we feel it might last for so long, and it causes us to feel that we cannot proceed with whatever we have to do at the time. So sometimes we become so anxious that it makes the symptoms worse. But it's important for us to pay attention to these things. Anxiety can also affect every system of our body, including the digestive system. We have acid reflux, we have chemicals that react in our body that moves into our digestive system that can make us to have nausea, indigestion, or stomach cramps. So poor nutrition or lack of exercise may further affect problems with our digestive system. A quote by Paul T said, "One cannot remove anxiety by arguing it away." So it means you just have to admit that, oh, this is actually happening. How can I make sure this thing does not go on? These are things we need to understand, the fact that, okay, this is happening to me right now. How do I move forward? So an anxiety trigger is something that sets off our feelings, okay? That specific actions or experiences that can initiate this anxiety can actually worsen it. But it's important for us to cope with them, knowing that it will not last for so long. So we have many individuals with anxiety that find that they have several triggers, but they do not really recognize these triggers easily. When we understand that we're able to identify our own triggers, so it means each person's triggers differ from another. So when you are able to identify your own trigger, you can easily let go of it. You can easily do away with it as time goes on. Like for me, I know that, okay, when I'm having anxiety, or my palms start to sweat, or I start to feel some shaking and all that, okay, I understand these things for myself and I know how to deal with it. So uncertainties are part of some things that happen in our lives. Fear of the unknown. What will happen if I do this? What will happen if I don't do this? These are things that we think about when we have fear of the unknown. Sometimes we have confrontation that are not so easy. Some people who have a severe fear of conflict and confrontation, we try to do anything to avoid these situations. Some people don't like to be confronted, like you just meet them, you're telling them, oh, this is what they did wrong. They do not like it. So such persons will always have social anxiety. Although most of these fears are generally unfounded, they can be a strong cause in many cases of anxiety. So oftentimes, assertiveness is confused with aggressiveness, in which people do not want to take risks speaking up in case of others because they might become offended or disagree with the matter, and therefore they try to avoid confrontation as long or as much as they can. Okay, so when we fear speaking up, such as a manager or a co-worker, we second guess ourselves. We fear repercussion. We fear, oh, what will my boss say? Or if I confront my colleague, what will she say? Or what will he say? These things can actually lead to anxiety. When we hold our feelings also, we not only allow our body to express how it naturally feels. This forces our brain to hold on to our negative thoughts. So it means sometimes we hold on to so much feelings, negative feelings especially, that we do not even want to share them, okay? And it bottles up in us that we have that anxiety eventually. But some things that can actually help us to overcome this is by talking to someone, a friend, a counselor, a family member, okay? And one important thing is also keeping a journal. I'm not sure this is common in this part of the world, but I would say that the times I remember keeping a journal for 2 straight years were the times I was able to measure my growth, okay? So it helps us to speak out loud into our journal, write out things that we feel, or things that we feel we need to do, or things that might prevent us from doing certain things, okay? It helps us to share our thoughts or our emotion by it's like we are dumping those things in the journal, or dumping those things on the person we are talking with, okay? These are ways we can actually express our feelings. So holding up to feelings can go a long way in affecting or making us have anxiety. Public speaking, yes, speaking in front of others is one common, it's actually the most common social fears. We allow them to hear what we have to say and possibly pass judgment on it. You know, some of us, we begin to fear making a mistake, or the fact that someone could have negative feelings about us. Okay, when speaking in public or in front of a group, we become anxious because we feel as though we are in a hot seat and cannot escape if we start to feel uncomfortable. You know, we have this game that people play, hot seats, where you are asked so much questions that even questions that you don't feel like answering, okay, people ask. That is what we feel when we are speaking in public, or when we are giving a speech, or when we are addressing a crowd, okay? But we begin to fear making a mistake, or the fact that someone could have negative feeling about us. Okay, this can actually be overcome. Uncertainties are part of life. Some people appreciate the excitement of uncertain times. The age-old saying, no one is perfect, yes. If you understand as a person that no one is perfect, you know, even the people I'm speaking with right now, they are not perfect. So it means if they were in my shoes, they can actually be fidgeting or be feeling the way I'm feeling right now, okay? So when we say this to ourselves that, oh, perfection will not make others happy, perfection will not make me happy, these are ways we can actually control the situation, and we eventually make anxiety shut down. Rose F. Kennedy said, neither comprehension nor learning can take place in an atmosphere of anxiety. Definitely, when you have anxiety, you cannot learn, you cannot comprehend. So it means it's as if your brain is shut down for that period of time. You are not definitely productive within that period of time. So it's important that we try as much as we can to overcome anxiety. Like I said earlier when we started this lesson, I mentioned the fact that there's a difference between anxiety and nervousness. So anxiety is not temporal, okay? It goes beyond nervousness with symptoms that can be crippling or debilitating and typically interfere with our ability to complete certain tasks. Everyone gets nervous, definitely, when it comes to stressful situations like I mentioned earlier, taking a test, finishing a project, teaching a class, presenting a speech, you know, and the likes. A whole lot of things, facing the crowd. So it's a natural response to specific situations, okay? But nervousness can be controlled, okay, within a specific period of time. Nervousness can cause mild symptoms like fidgeting, stomach fluttering, okay, shaking of hands, or like I mentioned earlier, sweating of the palms, okay. Anxiety is not temporal, like I mentioned, and it goes beyond nervousness with symptoms that can be crippling and that can even happen for a long time. Anxiety can happen throughout the day, throughout a week, throughout a month, depending on how we manage it, okay? While many fears are justified, usually we have anxiety that can happen anytime without a particular cause or root. Unfortunately, we are not able to see that our anxiety does not have real basis, yet we still have the same feeling. Sometimes we are not able to determine the cause of our anxiety, but it's important for us to not to avoid them. Face it head on. Anxiety does not give us a warning sign. It is better to learn to accept the symptoms as they come and remember to walk through them instead of turning away from them. Learning to accept that this is happening to us at this time, it's important. So the duration of symptoms of nervousness, like I mentioned minutes ago, general nervousness symptoms appear when we are faced with uncomfortable situations, okay, that do not last a very long time. However, we have anxiety symptoms that can typically last a very long period of time, okay? They can last several minutes, several days, and all that, like I mentioned earlier. So we have intensity of symptoms. When we are nervous, we can experience symptoms that can cause discomfort, that can make us have quickened breath, okay? Anxiety symptoms can be similar, but they can appear more exaggerated and intense. Sometimes one even have to get medical attention when faced with anxiety. Sometimes we have to visit the doctor to get diagnosis, and then sometimes you're yearly diagnosed of having anxiety, and you have to be placed on proper treatment, and to also take time to respond to treatment. So similar to anxiety, nervousness is a feeling that is brought on by stressful situations, okay, but it can actually be managed. Anxiety has more complex factors, okay, it can interfere with our life, but nervousness can be managed within that particular moment and resolved. So some of the things that anxiety that can interfere with a lot of our life can include our interactions with others, can affect our sleeping order, can make us lose concentration, and prevent us from having daily care, like caring for ourselves. And most importantly, can prevent us from learning. So it means if maybe you are taking a course or you're in school, it's important to avoid anxiety as much as possible. So the many complexities of life can cause anxiety. We have several levels of anxiety. We have the mild anxiety, moderate, severe, and panic level anxiety. It's important that we identify the particular level we are. But most importantly, it's important that with the moment we realize that we are facing anxiety, we face it head on and try to solve it as much as we can. Anxiety is being managed easily when it's at the mild stage, when it's still at the lower level. But the moment it starts getting to the panic level, it becomes very, very difficult to manage. So the mild anxiety could be when this anxiety is momentary, okay? It's not something that lasts a very long period of time, okay? And the moderate one could happen more frequently, but it can actually still allow you to function daily. The severe ones would start interfering with your daily routines, and the panic level one is when you have to seek for medical attention. Steve Maraboli says, I promise you nothing is as chaotic as it seems. Nothing is worth poisoning yourself into stress, anxiety, and fear. Definitely, when you poison yourself with stress, anxiety, and fear, you would never gain anything. Now, if anxiety does not have a strong impact on our life, then there are chances that we have others around us that might be affected by this anxiety. So we have many people that can suffer or that currently suffer from anxiety on a day-to-day basis. And it can be difficult to see those around you also suffering from it sometimes, whether a close friend or a family member. But those that have experienced it will easily know that, oh, this is what this person is experiencing at this time. And they can easily show empathy for them at that time. For people with social anxiety disorder, it is more than just occasional nerves or shyness that causes them to avoid social or public situations. These individuals feel self-conscious and fear being embarrassed. They fear being judged. They fear being scrutinized, okay? So with social anxiety, it is not only the avoidance of these social situations, but the avoidance of the feeling that escalates the anxiety, which means they even fear the feeling, not just about them having that particular fear at that time, okay? They fear the feeling of having, and they try to deny the fact that they are having that feeling at that time. So many people fear a variety of these social or public situations, including parties, events, group meetings. You will see such people trying to avoid gatherings as much as they can. There will be those people in your office that will say, oh, we're having this, and they'll say, no, I'm not interested. Oh, I have, they will start rescheduling. They don't want to do this at this time, okay? They will give you a lot of excuses to make you, to prove to you that, oh, they're not really ready for this, okay? But we know that at some point, these situations cannot be avoided for long, especially for FMs that want to grow to a certain level. We always say that if you are not on the table, you are on the menu. So, but for you to be on the table, you have to try as much as you can to avoid, not to avoid social situations, not to have social anxiety. If you know you have that, try as much as you can to do all you can to avoid it, to fix it, talk to someone, write in a journal, just do all you can to avoid it, okay? So we have someone who suffers from an anxiety disorder may have trouble accepting feedback from others, may have the fear of rejection, the fear of argument, or the fear of judgment, as the case may be. So we have maybe in our offices, among co-workers, in management, avoiding negative feedback, avoiding constructive criticism. Okay, you don't want to know, okay, you just did a presentation and you can't even ask, oh, how did I do? You're already afraid that, oh, they will say you didn't do well, okay? When you start having that fear of difficulty in accepting negative feedback, it can actually lead to anxiety that the next time you want to do that same thing, you're afraid of what will happen next, okay? So that's an employee that often absorbs that negative feedback as a form of judgment, which in turn can heighten the feeling of being scrutinized or embarrassed. When preparing to speak with someone, you suspect that, oh, that information will not be taken well. So no need, okay? It's important that we try as much as we can to accept this criticism so that we can do better next time. It's also normal to sometimes lack concentration at work. Sometimes it's difficult for us to focus at work. Sometimes we find we just feel distracted. But if someone has difficulty focusing on several projects or even one main project, it could be related to anxiety. So we have at our workplace when we are given several tasks, maybe you have about 10 tasks that you have outlined to do, and then it's 12 noon, you've not even done up to 2. Then you need to check yourself to really know if this is what you're facing at this time. Are you getting distracted? Are you having fear of what would be the result of whatever you do? Okay. Do you have distractions around you? Do you have noises around you in the office? Are you distracted by those around you? These are questions you need to ask yourself. Okay. Sometimes we worry about what people say about us, and you now start having anxiety with that. Oh, someone is talking about me. Oh, are they talking about me? Oh, is that my computer making noise? Oh, is that me doing this? You start asking yourself these negative questions, but these things can actually lead to what? Internal distractions that can prevent us from eventually delivering having our deliverables at the end of the day. It is normal to have some fears or concerns at work, okay? But when these fears begin to control our behavior, they can interfere with our performance and even affect those around us. Okay, the moment you start getting distracted or you are being controlled by your own behavior, you might not know your actions or inactions is affecting the next person beside you. So it's important for us to check ourselves. Many people actually can recognize that their fears are irrational or have no reasoning, but they cannot seem to control their reaction, okay? They change or change the way they feel about it. Irrational fears can include the fear of missing a project deadline when they have completed the assignments, or the fear of being fired, or being, just being the direct cause of a situation, okay? This will often appear anxious and may try to overcompensate. So the fear to overcome this ability to work and might actually render them to not function properly at work. So in addition to be able to recognize the signs of anxiety that I have mentioned earlier, it's also important to know how to support those that are in this situation. Like I mentioned earlier, those that have been in this situation can easily identify those that are currently in the situation. And it is easy for them to listen. It is easy for them to become flexible when relating with such person. It is easy for you to understand that particular person. So anxiety can be a mental health condition, okay, but it can be managed. And I'll keep saying that it can be managed. So for those that are experiencing this, if you are not experiencing it, you can ask questions like, how are you doing? Would you like to talk about it? What can I do to help? But it is also important that we do not push such person into spilling out what they are not ready to spill, okay? Let's just try as much as we can to be accommodating and try to encourage those that are in such situations now. Life is 10% experience and 90% how you respond to it. Life is 10% experience and 90% how you respond to it. Sometimes we go to a lot of situations and we dwell on whatever we are going through at the moment instead of responding positively to it. Now let's talk about the strategies in overcoming these anxiety problems. Once we have identified what type of anxiety problems we are facing, we can easily focus on how to cope with it and how we can manage it or control it, even as we go on in our everyday life. So the coping strategies for anxiety, we have several coping strategies. I think we'll talk about 2 or 3. So since anxiety and the symptoms will affect everyone differently, so too will strategies for coping with anxiety. So it means if I have problem A or anxiety A, or my anxiety is caused by A, it means I have to use strategy A to actually manage it. So each and every one of us will have various symptoms that we mentioned earlier, but then it's important for us to identify the strategies that can help us overcome such anxiety. The first that I mentioned earlier is keeping a journal. It's a constructive way to channel our feelings of stress, okay? And it's a place to let go of negativity, explore our fears, and manage stress. So our goals, our thoughts, the dreams can also be communicated into a journal. So you can keep a personal journal, either if you keep it in a drawer or you use your phone. All I'm saying is that your journal should be accessible. Especially when you know you have constant anxiety or nervousness, it's important you keep these feelings in track so that you can easily identify when you are feeling such, when you're having such feeling. So sometimes our anxiety can get the better of us. Yes, it can get the best of us actually, simply because we let them hang on to us. We do not let them go, or especially when we do not have positive thinking about it. Okay, you're like, oh, I can't do it. Oh, I'm going to die. Oh, I'm going to faint. Okay, you just keep having these negative feelings when you're doing certain things. But when you're positive about the things you do, oh, I can do it. Oh, I have just minutes left. Even though you have so many, a lot of things to do, try to minimize these things instead of exaggerating. It will help in checking anxiety. So it's important that we also focus on calming ourselves and having positive, soothing thoughts that can help us feel better. And whatever situation we might face, you can easily let it go. Especially when you want to have a presentation and maybe for the very first time, you are facing a large crowd and then you are there. And the next thing, your brain is off. You can't go ahead, okay? These are times when you have to speak to yourself, oh, I can do this. Oh, I'm not perfect, okay? I can do this. I'm not perfect. You just keep saying this to yourself. And then knowing that we eventually get through it and you see yourself coming back to normal and avoiding that stress and replacing them with those encouraging thoughts. Another way of doing that is when we feel stressed or feel overwhelmed, it's important that we have a place we can go just for us, like creating a me place, a place where is actually secluded. You can have few minutes to think about yourself, think about how you can get away from such situation, okay? You can, maybe it can be in your office, it can be at home, anywhere you just feel you can have your me time. It's important that we established this particular point from time to time. Now, setting goals for ourselves is also a good practice, especially when we want to cope with anxiety, but we want to ensure that our goals are not so large. I've had someone say that when you set goals that are not so large, they're not really goals, okay? They're not, how would I put it now? They're not really big goals that you feel, oh, when you achieve them, you can say, oh, Vala, I've done so much, okay? But it's important that we set goals little by little, set goals that are achievable. We shouldn't set goals that scare us, that we even become so anxious that we cannot even achieve it eventually, okay? It's important that we ensure that our goals are not daunting or they do not scare us. To focus on goals that we can realistically achieve. We should also keep in mind that there are some things we cannot change, like giving a weekly presentation, for example. Maybe in your organization, it is bound for you to give a weekly presentation, or it is bound for you to give a daily physical report. These are things that you cannot avoid. But what you can change is the way you go about it. And you can set goals to be able to handle such situation, okay? And one important thing that you can do to avoid being jittery or having these anxieties to be prepared. When you are prepared, you will definitely not fear, okay? So it's important that we are prepared at all times. But the thing is, even when you are prepared, sometimes you still see this fear coming to you. But within that particular space of time, you can still easily overcome such fear. Amit Ray says, if you want to conquer the anxiety of life, live in the moment, live in the breath. So it means don't think about what's going to happen tomorrow. Think about how you can tackle it now instead of living outside that moment. Coping strategy 2. Now, this coping strategy emphasizes self-help tactics that can actually help us undo anxiety and prevent it from interfering with our everyday life. I mentioned earlier that we have various levels of anxiety, the mild one and the one that gets to the panic mode, okay? These 4 stages. But the moment you are able to avoid making sure that this anxiety did not get to the panic stage, it will definitely not affect your everyday life. So these coping strategies, whether they are social, emotional, or physical, can make a whole lot of difference. So when there is a wide range of strategies, you can easily pick out the ones that you know would help you overcome such challenge at that time. And it's also important to pick elderly. With a little effort and motivation, you'll really be amazed at how successful you are at managing the anxiety you feel. I mentioned earlier also that you can talk with friends, because anxiety can be very overwhelming and sometimes it can make you feel alone. So when you have someone to talk to, someone that can relate to your feelings, someone that you know will be willing to help, okay, you can talk to such persons, a family member or friend that can actually help you. But when you know that, especially for those that have trust issues, you feel you cannot talk to a friend or a family member, it's important to seek more external support, like maybe visiting a therapist or something. They will actually offer support and advise you on what you need to do accordingly. One very important thing, yes, getting enough sleep. This happens to most of us. We work the whole day, we get home, we continue doing one task or the other, and we end up sleeping late. Or we have one project to catch up with, we need to finish this project, we need to get up early, we need to run some errands, okay? These are things we do that can actually deprive us of sleep. And definitely sleep disorder can actually lead to anxiety. So when we have enough sleep, sleep replenishes our body, okay? It helps us get ready to face a new day and it actually revitalizes our minds and help us to get really active during the day. So it's important that we try, even though we've been advised to have uninterrupted 8-hour sleep, which is definitely difficult, not easy, I must confess. But then we have to create time for rest. Try as much as you can to sleep as much as you can during the night and take as much nap as possible during the day. Okay, this would help us to keep our minds intact and have strength to be able to cope with strategies or cope with the things that we need to do from time to time. Eating well and exercise, yes, this cannot be overemphasized. Drinking a lot of water can actually help us fortify our bodies and improve our immune system. And it will actually help us to withstand or stand against stress in our body. Breathing exercises can also help us, can do that from time to time, especially when you want to have a presentation and then you're feeling tense at the moment. Just take, deep breaths and then you see that you get better. So when coping with our anxieties, we know we have to start from somewhere. We can start from where we are now. We can, set goals to determine what we need to do. So when we decide to change our behavior or find a better way to handle it, we can do a lot of things to make us achieve our tasks, to become focused. So once we've been able to accomplish this, we can set another goal, and as we do it step by step, we see that we start getting better. For example, you have to set a goal to overcome your anxiety by speaking in front of a large crowd. You can start small with something like, okay, practicing your speech, okay? Try to ask someone, maybe present to someone, and then get a feedback, learn to know how you can do better. And then with time, you see that you find yourself speaking in a large crowd. William James said, nothing is so fatiguing as the eternal hanging on of an uncompleted task. I'm sure as FMs we face this a lot. Even those that are not FMs too, we have uncompleted tasks and we have it just, choking us. It can be fatiguing. It can lead to stress. It can lead to anxiety. But then just take one day at a time. There's a common belief that if we ignore our anxiety, then it will go away. Definitely, it will not go away. It will remain there. Some people will use distracting measures to ignore anxiety, such as reading a book. You see someone is faced with anxiety and will say, I want to just clean the whole house today because of the way I'm feeling. But that will just give a temporary relief at the moment, but it can eventually have a damaging effect. So with anxiety, it's important to critically face the truth and acknowledge the problem. Recognize that anxiety is always present. Anxiety will only continue to linger and intensify if it is not addressed. Mistakes are part of everything we do in life, definitely. We make mistakes from time to time. And when we understand that those we face also actually make mistakes, some people will say, oh, I don't want to even attempt this at all because I know I'm going to make mistakes. Oh, I will get, bashed or blasted for what I'm doing right now. I'll be judged, I'll be embarrassed. But you can make that mistake so you can learn from it and get better and do better next time. So when we realize that we are able to acknowledge these anxieties, we realize that it's okay to make mistakes and face the consequence if there is. We'll see that we eventually learn from these things as it goes. So one of the important steps in managing our anxiety is taking a deep breath and accepting the situation before it comes to us. I've said this before. So once we accept them, it is easy for us to move on with our lives and not dwell on them, okay? When we start feeling anxious about a problem or situation, our first instinct most of the time is to completely avoid it, okay? But this action only hinders our progress to managing our anxiety and anxiety symptoms and can eventually make the symptoms grow worse. So when we avoid the feeling of anxiety or we avoid the symptoms, it does not make it go away. The problem we even if we try to engage ourselves in some things, we might just have a temporary feeling of relief. But then the moment we start thinking about those things again, it triggers anxiety all over again. So we need to train our minds to fear the situations or problems that causes anxiety. When trying to manage the symptoms or the feelings of anxiety, it's important that we identify the triggers and try to identify things that can make it go away. Okay, sometimes they are obvious, sometimes they are not obvious. But then it's important that we find a simple way to identify these triggers. If possible, write them down, okay, so that we can, whenever it happens the next time, we can say, oh, this is what I did, or this is what happened to me the other time. Oh, now I know what it is. So we can actually keep track of the times we are faced with this. Another important thing is to know that we are not alone. Like I mentioned earlier, some of us have been faced with this, and it's easy for us to deal with those that have faced it. So those that are currently facing such situation should also know that they can get support from others. And when they talk it out, it can actually make them feel better. So all of us will definitely face some level of anxiety from time to time in our workspace, at home, wherever we find ourselves, but it can be overcome. Do not anticipate trouble or worry about what may never happen. Keep in the sunlight. That's Benjamin Franklin. So we know that these things will always happen. So we should always prepare ourselves for such feeling. Anxiety is a normal feeling that everyone experiences at some point. When we experience this situation, it's important that we focus on the positive aspects. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, it's a time for you to say, oh, something is not right. It will trigger you to channel your mind to say, oh, I need to identify what is not right at this moment, okay? And these feelings of fear and anxiety can serve as a very important purpose, preparing our bodies for flight or fight. One of the most beneficial and most overlooked aspects of anxiety is that it alerts us to danger and tells us that something is wrong. So anxiety tells you, don't go that way. Especially maybe you're walking at night. Anxiety tells you, oh, there might be danger ahead, don't go that way. or you're entering an elevator that is packed full of people, and you're like, oh, I don't know what will happen if I enter this elevator. Let me take the next one. Okay, we just have things like just have this feeling coming to us from time to time that, oh, don't do this or don't do that. So these are signs, possible signs that can actually help us. It also improves our self-awareness. You can ask questions like, well, what am I doing here? What am I feeling right now? How do I react to this? Okay, talked about that. Now, motivation comes in all shapes and sizes, and anxiety is one of them. Sometimes we believe that anxiety keeps us from doing certain things. Sometimes it actually motivates us to do certain things. Anxiety may tell us that you are too anxious to give that speech in front of everyone, but it's also a motivating factor to tell you that you can conquer your fear and that you can do this at this time. You can deliver this speech at this time. Another instance is that anxiety may tell you that it is dangerous to leave your car unlocked or in an empty parking lot. So your body just reacts to these things, and you see that you are being motivated at these instances. So because anxiety motivates us to make good decisions and act, it also prevents us from making mistakes. Anxiety tells us, will tell us, don't leave your car unlocked, or don't leave your car in the middle of a parking lot, or, lock your doors. These are things that anxiety can prompt you to do. It's important that we take note of these things. And sometimes when we realize that we are maybe preparing for a project, anxiety tells you, I need to prepare effectively. Anxiety tells you, I need to look at my slides. I need to dot my I's. I need to cross my T's. That is what anxiety tells you. It prevents you from making mistakes. So when you listen to what anxiety tells you, sometimes it makes you recognize danger or alarms you to what you need to do. Empathy, I talked about this earlier, about those that must have experienced anxiety before now. They can actually find ways in helping others. It is well to remind ourselves that anxiety signifies a conflict, and so long as conflict is going on, a constructive solution is possible. Definitely. We have to always face conflict head on by being constructive. It's also important for us to know when to seek extra help. I mentioned that when we're talking about the levels of anxiety. When we realize that we are getting to the panic stage of anxiety, it's important that we seek for medical attention. Sometimes we need help and we need guidance from others in order to help ourselves. And when we feel trapped or we feel the state of fear constantly throughout the day, throughout the week, or most of the time in our lives, it's important for us to reach out to someone and seek out for help. Anxiety may also lead to exhausting us physically or mentally. It actually adds to our problems. Sometimes the help from family members and friends may not be enough to ease that problem, and then we have to seek professional help. I mentioned earlier that we have physical changes that can occur when we have this anxiety happening to us, the rapid heartbeats, headaches, sweating, and the likes. It's important that these random symptoms do not become an habit over time. Like I mentioned earlier, I know for myself that when I have sweaty palms, I'm feeling I'm on the stage of having anxiety at the moment, and I have to bring myself out of it. But when we do not pay attention to these things, it becomes part of us, okay? It becomes part of us to the extent that we feel almost every time more fatigue, we feel exhausted every time, we feel this negative energy at all times, we feel this impulsive feeling at all times, which can eventually lead us towards having less productivity at work. It will make us not to function well at work. Our productivity will definitely drop. However, when these feelings overwhelm us and we are unable to perform our normal duties, then we know it has become a problem. And sometimes we can actually help those around us to identify these things. When we feel panic attacks, it can be scary and can lead to a very, very serious problem, especially when it happens to us in public. But we can prevent this by making sure that we function normally by identifying these things by ourselves. Some people feel irritated a whole lot. They overreact at every little thing. They are so impatient and they becomes passively aggressive. Okay, you ask them a simple question and they are already escalating the whole thing. Okay, it's important that we know that these things are caused by anxiety. Okay, it's important that we identify these things, understand the underlying fears of these situations, and eventually solve them. Coming to a close, we know we've talked about this extensively, but then there's a lot we need to do for ourselves. We can, like I mentioned earlier, identify the triggers, try to seek help as much as we can, and most importantly, do not dwell on these things, okay? If we have questions, we can drop them on the chat box or on the group, on the facility management group. I would want to wrap up by also reminding us to always stay focused, try as much as we can to manage our anxiety by identifying the things that can trigger them in our workplace. And most importantly, please, let's try to sleep well, drink much water as much as we can. I would also want to use this opportunity to remind us once again of the facility management training for the sake of those that did not join on time. We have the next batch starting August 19. So please, the registration is ongoing. So you can do all you can to start registering and talk to someone, tell someone that you know about the training. It's really important. I would want to close by reading these few quotes. Anxiety is a thin stream of fear trickling through the mind. If encouraged, it cuts a channel into which all other thoughts are drained. I'll leave this with us today, that we try as much as we can to not dwell too much on the negative things that happens around us. Try as much as we can to overcome this. Thank you and see you next week. Bye, everyone.